Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation. If you're just joining us, in the room with you is Eric Latif, CT Muga, and Wanjiro Gikonyo. We have a guest in the studio. His name is Dannish Odongo. We'll be introducing him shortly, but let's first of all cook today's proverb.
It is not the cook's fault when the cassava turns to be hard and tasteless.
Okay. So who do we blame here? The
Well,
water, the soil, the harvester.
I wouldn't even think of blame, but if you really must point a finger at someone or something, you point a finger at the cassava. Who told it to be tasteless and hard?
Maybe the farmer.
CT wants to
What
expand
variety
his
of
repertoire
seed?
to his repertoire to comedy. That's a good one.
Told you to be hard and tasteless.
We'll eat you anyway.
Or you think we're going to blame the farmer? We are not blaming the farmer. We
It's the
know your
cassava.
games.
It's
You cassava.
You cassava, we know you. Tumekuonea 18.
Yes.
Dannish Odongo, journalist and founder of The Wellness Tribe, joins us in the studio. Good morning, Dannish.
Good morning, Latin.
How are you?
Niko salama sana, and you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too, bro.
Yes, I worked with this gentleman
Yeah.
in the last century,
The previous century.
previous century.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Dannish, The Wellness Tribe.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. What's that?
So, the Wellness Tribe, pretty much, it's an organization that wants to mainstream the prevalent mental health issues we're facing in this country, but link them to the breakdown of governance structures or the governance issues we have in this country. One of them being corruption. But also, we're going to go further to link gender-based violence to the state of mental health. We have what we call adverse childhood experience, basically about some of the 10 issues people have gone through and how that is leading to some of the major chronic illnesses we see in this country. There's a whole lot of work that has been done around this in the Western world, but in this country, we are still stuck in defining mental health from a medical perspective only, without looking at it as a symptom of a breakdown of social structures and a breakdown of governance structure. That's what my organization does.
Take a step back. You talked about adverse.
Childhood experience. So there's something called advanced childhood experience. This is a test that is available globally. I don't know why we don't do it in Kenya here. But if you went through certain experiences, including abandonment, or maybe you had a parent who perhaps, suffered from drug and substance abuse, maybe you were abused, there are about 10 of them. So if you tick at least 4 of those things, you are likely to struggle with drugs and substance abuse. You're likely to struggle with the top leading chronic illnesses that kills adults, including high blood pressure, cancer, depression, and all these things. We don't talk about this in this country because I don't know whether we don't know or maybe we're just more consumed with the curative aspect of this thing.
What do the experts say?
The expert, what do the experts say?
Those experts in mental health, what do they say? Why is it not mainstreamed?
It's not mainstream because I think we are still at a very formative stages of this conversation around mental health. We were barely talking about it, but now we are talking about it. So now what we are basically doing is symptoms of depression, 1, 2, 3, anxiety symptoms are like this, which is fine, and that's there's a place for that. But I believe that people like us who share a heart in governance structures being the solution to many of the problems that we face, we wanted to take the conversation slightly deeper, and that's why we registered a nonprofit called the Wellness Tribe, where we do research, storytelling, capacity building, and we do experiences just to advance this conversation.
Dennis, when you say that there are countries in the world that have advanced this, and then you compare to our country and say that we are still in the formative stages, you do have a point. But formative from the perspective of mental health through the eyes of health practitioners, medical health practitioners. Because when you talk about health practitioner, you could talk about traditional.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
And you could talk about other branches of it. Now, the point I'm trying to make here, and I'm going to make the point by asking a question, okay? What you say is true. Because our societal makeup looks at what we call mental health under one label.
Yes.
Madness.
Yes.
But you want to go beyond this and say it isn't just that. So what else is it?
Thank you so much. You're actually absolutely true. Right, because the Kenya mental health policy actually recognized the place of traditional healers in tackling this mess. But then we have what we call the quality rights, which is a World Health Organization's policy document that is supposed to guide how we deal with mental health. And they're making this grand proposal of us going back to what we call community recovery centers as the a silver bullet to deal with mental health issues, So you find that the biggest problem we have is that we have these huge institutions where we take people from Mandera everywhere, they come to Muthui Teaching and Referral Mental Health Hospital. And then when they go back home, they cannot be reintegrated. But what we could actually do is to fix the level 2 hospital in Mandera, to fix, the home where that person lived in Mandera, because there is a correlation between the kind of home people live in and the explosion of mental health issues. And you could fix their employment opportunities in Mandera so that then they don't have to be strained and be removed from their social structures, where now they have to battle traffic jam and come and eat food that God knows where it's planted. You all know where our kales come from, So all these things compromise the mental health. But now you find that the level where we are right now, which is a brilliant place, and I've been part of this conversation for the last 3 years, is that we are still talking about it's okay not to be okay. Fantastic. But when we're done talking about it's okay not to be okay, then let's ask, why is it that they say that 2 out of 4 people who go to the hospital are likely to have a mental health disorder? Why is it that when we did the survey in Nairobi, 38% of young people between the ages of 18 and 35 are living their worst life, their worst possible life? Why is it that we are not talking about the correlation between joblessness and mental health? And why is it that we're not talking about the 600 billion or the third of Kenya's budget that is cutted away? Why are we not saying that, okay, this money is what is robbing young people of the opportunities? It's robbing them of their jobs. It's robbing them of their peace of mind. And this is leading to the explosion of mental health. And there is a scholar who actually did a fantastic job, The Rest of the Earth. Talks about when you see an explosion of mental health, you basically are seeing a society that is breaking down.
You're talking about Frantz Fanon.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've brought in the study that you conducted. Tell us about the study, the background, and how you conducted this study, and then you'll tell us what the findings.
Okay, so we basically wanted to find out, because when you talk about corruption in this country, people usually want to box you in us versus them. So either you're supporting Jubilee or you're supporting NASA. We said, no, that's such a very narrow way. So let's look at what are the common things that people struggle with in this country. So it's livelihood, basically, food, shelter, clothing. And we said, let's sample, because the amount of money we had was only enough to do a survey in Nairobi. So we said, we will look at the perceived political leaning, looking at the MP that was voted in that constituency. We look at the urban, whether it's urban or peri-urban. We look at the religious leaning, and then we look at the perceived social class. But of course, we also look at the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, in terms of narrowing this. And then we selected 9 constituencies in Nairobi. We're looking at the 50% of constituencies in Nairobi, about 18 of them. And then we basically did a 94% response rate. We had a 5% confidence rate. And then we issued this through what we call a computer-assisted personal interviews, where we basically, did the questionnaire in a tool that could even geolocate where these questionnaires were being administered, so that we wanted to be sure not people are sitting in their houses and filling these forms, And then it was analyzed using SPSS version 26 statistical software because of its high accuracy and reliability. And that survey was done in the month of May, from the date of 19th May to 22nd of May 2021.
What are you asking?
The questions we were asking were as simple as, we're looking at the age, first of all. Then we're looking at the monthly household income. We're looking at the living situation. We're looking at rent. And this was very interesting because we found out that 55% of our respondents pay rent between 1,000 and 5,000 Kenyan shillings, which then makes you wonder why we should not deal with rent control rather than all this obsession with affordable housing. And education, we found out that 43% of young people are just secondary education, but we are so obsessed with university. And the question we're asking, first of all, is, for example, the perception about corruption. We asked people that when you hear the word corruption, what comes to mind? You'd be shocked what young people say, that politician comes to mind at 31%. When you mention the word corruption, politician comes to mind.
Followed by?
Bribe at 27%.
Followed by?
Thief at 26%.
Followed by?
BBI at 8%. Hustler at 6%. Businessman at 2%. Police comes much lower.
So
You
in
didn't
terms
ask
of
me.
perceptions, young
Yes.
people are right on it.
Exactly. They see politicians
Yeah.
and they see their money cutted away.
Yeah.
Period.
So people know.
Exactly.
Even the youth know.
Exactly.
What struck me with the demographics was you talk about this household income being between 1,000 to 10,000. What also concerned me, you talk about rent being up to 5,000,
Yes.
household income up to 10,000. And I was like, my God,
Exactly.
that's not a living wage. Then the other thing that struck me is the number of young people still living at home.
Exactly. Exactly.
You know, so I'm like, these demographics are painting a picture of young people who don't have options.
Absolutely.
And I was then also, the last point, really concerned with the 43% secondary education, 11% up to only primary
Exactly.
in this day and age.
Exactly.
And
What were
then
you
there was
concerned
this
about the 43%?
outliers of 17% at university, got university level education, 2% got masters. That you have people, you're assuming that 18 years and above, they finish their education process. So that means 43 have not managed to get tertiary level. You know, that's a concern.
Why do you consider it to be of such great concern?
It's of concern because of opportunities and options. If you're looking for a job or you're trying to place somebody, if you have a course, whether it is masonry, whether it is hair, a course makes you more employable, makes you better able to earn for yourself, right? And government has, let's even leave government. The education system is supposed to put as many people as possible going into tertiary through the TVET system.
This education system that we have.
Through the TVET system.
Yeah, through the TVET. Huh?
Through TVETs. And TVETs, by the way,
Post-secondary education.
and TVETs, if you've been reading this year, there's money. Young people aren't going for TVETs. There's, negative, very negative view of it. But anyway, let's not digress. 43% is very high.
But let me just
It's
add to
almost
what
60% if you count the primary level.
Yeah, what Shiro is saying, the biggest problem we are facing in this country is underemployment, But if you look at also just, I'm a believer that we are a democracy, and a democracy is supposed to be driven by the views of the public. So if the views of the public, maybe assuming that we're going to have elections next year in 2022, and we have a manifesto.
Not
which-
assuming.
I mean, we're going to
When
have
we
elections.
have
Yes, when you have
elections.
elections.
He's
Don't
right.
bring a doubt.
He is
Don't
right.
fix a doubt in the mind of Kenyans. Do not buy that
No,
narrative.
It is not fixing
The
a
law
doubt.
says.
It is being real.
It is being real because if we understand our political class, that they may want to subvert what is in the constitution is a reality.
Verbal engineering precedes actual
Dannish, continue.
engineering. So,
So
Dannish, when we have elections.
when we have elections next year, then you have people of that, like in terms of that, and you give them documents, bottom-up approach. You give them buy, build in Kenya, political policies, and then you tell them to now choose a leader based on those, and they barely
Dannish,
have.
when you say bottom-up approach, my mind, just like the mind of the young people who went to politician, my mind goes to hustler. My mind goes to ODM.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you mean bottom-up approach?
I'm not saying that I want to dwell on that. All I'm saying is this.
No, I want, our audience has been hearing and reading about this bottom-up approach. I'd like you to explain it the way you understand it. What does it mean, bottom-up approach?
Let me first of all finish up the statement I was saying.
Please go ahead.
That these young people who you look at their education level and you look at their living standards, these people are more susceptible to be deceived, they're more susceptible to be taken advantage of, and they're more susceptible to be bought off for violence or for 1,000 shillings for their vote. And then ultimately we come up and blame them and say, oh, you know what, by the way, young people are
Choice you
corrupt.
made.
Young people are like this is a choice you make. You've already defrauded people of an opportunity to make an informed decision. Why are you blaming them? Then we are the ones who are supposed to say as a country that because we have neglected a huge population and a huge demographic, let us live with the consequences of our lack of policy in terms of education, in terms of ensuring that these people, and by the way, the biggest issue is that, when you grow up in a poor home, chances of you going to school post-secondary is very difficult. Absolutely, because you have Nairobi being 60% informal settlements. You have these people who are waking up in the morning, jumping over sewage. They left a home where perhaps parents are fighting at night. You go to school, you find a teacher who's frustrated because they also come from the same neighborhood, and then you expect them to pass. And then ultimately we come here and say, oh, this country is punishing many young people.
And remember, we're a middle-income country. That's where we are.
We are not a middle-income country.
I'm saying on paper, that's where we are setting ourselves.
We
but,
are a
but
third
the reality,
world banana republic. This this middle-income story, those who started it know why they started it. We are nowhere near being middle-income.
And this data is supporting you exactly.
You
that
see,
we've
Dannish,
neglected an entire
even as you
demographic.
say this, you see, Dannish is focusing. Remember, this is his method. It was purposive sampling. It's deliberate. He determines it. This isn't random.
No, the purposive sampling was in choosing the constituencies.
Nothing wrong.
Yeah.
But the moment you do that, my friend, what do you think takes place? You've already determined how it is. Nothing wrong with that method, by the way. As far as qualitative research is concerned, it is considered a good method. I'm not downplaying the method. I think it is a good method. I'm simply saying that when you focus the idea on the youth within an urban setting,
Yes.
how does that reflect on the youth who are not in an urban setting? Because the vast majority of our population is still not in our towns. It is in the rural areas. That is where I was going with my question.
I agree with you. And now you're very absolutely right. And of course, now moving forward with our Macho campaign, we are hoping that then we're going to do a groundbreaking work early next year to spread it across maybe at least 24 counties in this country. But we wanted, first of all, just to see, because I don't like talking about some things without really evidence and facts. And because of limited resources, we said, let's start with
Talk
Kanairo.
about what you have.
Let's start with Kanairo, yeah.
So I love the term macho.
Yeah.
What are you seeing? Because macho is macho ya kuona. It's also macho, this kind of like bravado, or what are you trying to bring across?
I got this from the scriptures, the book of Matthew, that talks about if your eyes are bad, then your whole soul is bad, because it's the entry of the soul is the eye. So for us, we're looking at it that if you empower people's eyes, you open their eyes and you let them see, then they're able to make informed decisions. And that's where the data comes in, because we wanted people to see Nairobi for what it is, not for these multiple layers and gentrification that has been done to it. So the idea is to remove the cataract of ignorance, and it's to remove, the layers of, media narrative that we've consumed for many years, and tell people what Nairobi it is. And then people can now make decisions knowing
Which people are you having the conversation with?
young people. We're basically telling them that this is your state in Nairobi. You may be coming from Mukuru Kwanjenga, but you're not so different from a young person who's coming from Makadara. You share the same narrative. By the only outlier in this research was in Langata. Langata, we found very high levels of optimism, very high levels of excitement, which we'd love to know. But
It's a good comparative.
A very good comparative. And Makadara was like the highest form of people who are living their worst life found in Makadara in our research. I don't know the
Makadara?
Makadara.
Do they
That's
explain?
interesting.
So, what was the question there that brings out that answer that I'm living my worst life?
The question we asked people that imagine yourself in a ladder, worst being 1, best being 10. And then we asked yourself, where do you see yourself? People see themselves. Of course, we did a comparative study and we found out that there's a correlation between political leaning, there's a correlation between, when you go Kombele, you find that when people are talking about the issues that are of concern to them, unemployment was leading in Makadara. So then you find that then there's a correlation between that and their optimism level.
Tell us about political leaning. That's fascinating. Is there a correlation, or is
There
that
is a
random?
correlation between, I think political narrative affects how people perceive reality. When when you come from a political, a political formation that sells a particular narrative, you're likely to believe in that narrative.
All right.
Yes, and that now affects how you see the world around you, whether it's true or not.
Explain that. What do you mean by political narrative? I can see you're moving away from political leaning. You don't want to support one party or the other.
Yeah.
So what are you saying? Break it down a little bit more. What kind of narratives are you saying? So you're saying the narratives of politicians and the way it's perceived by the youth
Exactly.
shapes the way the youth then
Exactly.
view their
Exactly.
life and their state of well-being.
Exactly. If your political leaders are constantly saying things are bad, we're not doing well, this country is doomed, and this is the side, and well, it may be real or may not be real. That's what the political leaning would perceive. Then you have this other side who are saying things are good, we are winning, we are the best. While that may not be real, you may find somebody in this political extraction who actually believes that they're living their best life while they're missing on all the indicators of best life. They're living in a horrible neighborhood, they're eating horrible food, but because their political class are saying this, then they're likely to believe that.
So the politicians are really influencing the youth.
Exactly. I don't even think it's politicians, it's us here who determines the headline, who determines the stories coming at 5, at 7.
So political narrative is not politicians, it is maybe the media.
Yeah, exactly. I've been a journalist, and if you go to cover political rally, they will talk for 10 hours or 6 hours. The editor will only take maybe 2 minutes or 3 minutes of that. How do we determine that if it's not to push a narrative?
So what are the influences? What's influencing political narratives, and what do you then propose needs to happen to those
what
political
now we're proposing
narratives?
the second phase of this
because you've done
survey.
the same thing. You see, you've taken this issue and then you're talking about lack of wellness and perception. So you're also fueling the negative narrative. So what are you saying?
What we are saying is this: we're not fueling the negative narrative. We wanted to find facts from the people. What we are saying here are what young people say, not us. Us, we're just the messengers. What we're going to do next is want to find out the correlation between media and some of these things that we are talking about, and hopefully we are going to, encourage media literacy and media awareness all through, because the consumption of media is the biggest influence in this country of perceptions in this country. Because we also ask that where do you get your facts about corruption, sources of corruption? TV at 16%. That's what people know. We ask them. Where do you access information about corruption in Kenya? TV is at 16%, Facebook at 15%, radio at 14%, WhatsApp 11%, Twitter 10%, newspapers and magazines 7%. So TV is still the biggest influencer in terms of perception.
Did your survey point to, for instance, expectancy levels and whether the environment in which someone lived determined that?
Not really, but we could actually do that by extrapolating this data and looking at the key life indicators in different constituencies and different hospitals.
When you mentioned Makadara, which Makadara?
The Makadara constituency.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, there's a reason why I'm asking the question about Makadara. You see, there's a term that psychologists use. They call it cognitive dissonance.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, if my expectation is not met, an expectation is arrived at by the narrative that I consume or is presented to me.
Exactly.
Some from a very early stage in my life, whether it's from within the family or, as we're saying, from politicians. If that isn't met, it tends to cause a conflict. It's an internal conflict. Now, that internal conflict then manifests itself. For instance, if you have a by-election, you will see it manifesting itself.
Exactly.
Promise, reality, don't concur, conflict. You then produce a situation where people start looking for an opportunity where ordinarily they wouldn't have sought an opportunity. Now, why do I bring this? You talk about Langata and what you found in Langata. That is supposed to be a middle class area.
Exactly.
So if people have expectations, you look around you, there are people who've had expectations that have been met. You take it to the low income areas, you find expectations may exist, but it isn't quite met because of all these socioeconomic situations and the societal hurdles that these people have to overcome in order to achieve whatever it is that they sought. Now, here comes my question. The vast majority of the population in this particular city live in those so-called informal settlements.
Exactly.
Okay? They are the ones who form the bulk of that voting population, whether it is at MCA level, whether it is MP level. Now you tell me, anyone who comes with a promise, whatever the promise is, your argument seems to be that, well, they'll choose one or the other. But I am saying they will choose the now.
Exactly.
And why would they be choosing the now?
Because it's something they can relate to a lot more easily.
And also
Because of their current situation.
Yes, because of what they've been fed, their lived experience has been, this future never really counts because you're born in a slum, you live there. So this future that people keep talking about, you realize this thing I don't think it's going to come. So when you have three options, the future, the this, and the now, you choose the now.
You
But
deal
you're
with it
also
now.
operating on survival mode.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to say. That
At the end of the day,
Exactly.
we'll come back to the mental health issue. Our guest in the studio today is Dannish Odongo. He is founder of the Wellness Tribe. They have just released some research findings after a report of some research that they did, mature baseline survey, reimagining the fight against corruption. And before we went to the break, City has talked about, okay, so there's where your respondents live, where they've come from, there's the expectations that they've had as they grew up, and then there's a reality. And then bring in the politician who comes and tells them all these lofty ideas about the future. What are they going to be thinking about? The future that they're yet to see, or the present?
But I think just Dannish told us it's not just politicians, it's also the media that shape youth perceptions. And in my mind, I love the research. I also like the fact that you're bringing out the issue of adverse childhood experiences as a really potentially blocking out an entire demographic from active engagement in the community and in development. Very good research, which you then want to use to empower the youth. These youth are still then going to be confronted by systems that aren't responsive, systems that have not invested in the community health level. So how do you want to bridge the use of data, empowerment of the youth, to the governance results that are required, or to the health investments that are required to deal with the problems?
Thank you so much, Shiro. I just want to respond to that first, then I come to yours. I don't know why we don't talk about this in the world, in Kenya, but there's overwhelming evidence that poverty affects the executive function part of the brain. That executive function is part of the brain that is about self-control, emotional control, decision-making, and all these things. It affects these things because poverty is violence, poverty is trauma. So you find that young people are likely to make, poor people are likely to make bad choices because even evidence has been proven that they lose, because of poverty, you can lose up to 13 IQ points when you go through poverty, because poverty is one of the advanced childhood experiences. So when now they're not able to live in future if they're not able to save and to make better decisions, it's not because they are bad people or they are broken. It's because the environment they grew up in has disempowered them like that. And that's why we must all fight poverty, because poverty is the biggest. And sometimes we look at them that if you're poor, it's your problem. But look at what we are losing in terms of human potential for this country. We want to compete with China. We want to compete with global giants. How are we going to compete with global giants when a huge percentage of your population are still dealing with basic things like food, shelter, and clothing? Now, coming back to you, the reason why I'm in the mental health space, but I've always told them that we must connect struggles. The mental health challenges, like for example, I'm a person with a lived experience. When I was home last year during the COVID pandemic, I could not get my medication in Kisumu. I had to make a phone call, and Dr. Siengo is the one who wrote for me a prescription. Then I came to Nairobi for me to get my medication. Now imagine we're living in a country where you're not able to get medical help in a place like Kisumu. Now think about somebody who's in Mandera. Think about somebody who's in Mombasa, But even if you go to Mathare Teaching and Referral Hospital, you find that they have a list of drugs that they give. This list of drugs is supplied by KEMSA. In public health hospital, you're likely to find only basic. So you find like conditions like ADHD, or you find conditions like schizophrenia or bipolar or some of these things. You're not likely to find medication. Now, to sort these things, we need to connect struggles. We need to talk about, debt. We need to talk about the broken down governance structure, so that then we fix the governance structure, so that the money, because this 2 billion shillings that is lost per day, we did the maths. That 2 billion shillings can give up to 2 million young people cash transfers per month of 10,000 shillings. You've only spent 200 million shillings of that money. You go ahead and buy them lunch, breakfast, and you give them supper. It's only 350 shillings in the slums. You've only spent, barely enough. You've not even reached the billion mark. You go ahead and decide, how do you love to dress up? Because people in these areas love to dress up from Tush. You still are not spending even 1 billion shillings, which means that this money that is stolen, and that's why I'm so passionate about this issue, that the third of our budget that is stolen, either through budgeted corruption or through debt corruption or through brazen theft, This money, if we seal all these loopholes, we fix this country. Not in 10 years, we fix this country in at least 5 years. We've fixed everything. We've fixed affordable housing. We've fixed rural economy. We've fixed our infrastructure. We've fixed all that we need to become a middle-income economy. But we don't have the political will. That's why we must come together as young people and make mental health and all these issues we are facing a political issue, not a medical issue.
Dannish, for mental health to be understood for what it actually is, I think it must be broken down to, in a way that we move from the concept of madness, as we call it, to understanding that when you are anxious, you are in the process of acquiring a mental health situation. May not be an illness. This will lead you to depression.
Exactly.
Now, with the depression comes all manner of other things.
Exactly.
Now, speaking, just colloquially, you are okay. You're just a bit sad, but you're actually not sad. Now, it is the position that many people find themselves in this country. Right now with COVID, you tell people that they are no longer going to be able to earn what they were earning. Causes anxiety. Somebody doesn't have the job they had, and yet the responsibilities that they had haven't gone anywhere. That anxiety is going to go into depression. Now, this is a situation that many people are facing now because of COVID, but it's a situation that people who live in the low rent areas, as we call them, they face on a daily basis. So if you're talking about a mental health situation in some of those areas, then you're saying, in my view, that the biggest problem you have in these areas are mental health issues.
Exactly.
Because if you're dealing with this situation every
day.
single day,
Exactly.
You're scarred for life.
and there's a glimmer of light, it may be a flicker, and then it goes off as soon as it
And
comes
it's
into
self-perpetuating.
Yes,
Because
yes.
it's
Yes.
teenage pregnancy is going to happen much
Exactly.
earlier.
Extrajudicial execution.
And
It's
then
going to happen. So
and
it's
then
so-
drug abuse. It's a vicious cycle. Let me not put it this way. It's a terrible vicious cycle.
Exactly.
In fact, it's a crime against the poor.
Exactly.
And I like what you said, that we need to get rid of poverty.
Exactly.
We need to prioritize the fight against poverty. And like I said, we're a lower middle income country.
Which country?
With these kind of demographics, we need to speak truth to power that we are lying. We are lying when a large demographic has been left out.
I don't know what I'm expecting, but somehow I'm feeling like we are not connecting the research findings directly to mental health. Or there's something that's missing here in the link between what you found. The respondents told you this. They told you how their expectations about the future, and they're telling you they don't have much expectation. Currently, they're feeling very low. But then now the connection between that and mental health. So we can then say, you see, mental health is being impacted by a broken governance system, like you said. I'm fine. There's a missing link for me when I look at this.
Okay.
The research. I don't know how it can
Would
be
you
brought
have
in.
wanted a survey on
No.
the actual status of their mental health?
But like the
is a link.
extrapolation.
There actually is a link. Eric is saying he doesn't see it. There is a link. Huh? One of the things that perpetual poverty does, among the many things it does for you, it provides you with an eternal low self-esteem.
Exactly.
Meaning, you always see yourself as an individual who can't do much. You can't achieve much. Meaning, you set the bar low. Now, if you set the bar low, anything that you may consider untoward, you will more or less consider it as normal.
Exactly.
Just like there are people, what we are considering poverty, that to them is normal. Now, this normalcy that Dannish and his group, in my view, found in the places where they conducted their research, it is this perpetuity of the situation that not just contributes, but has made mental health a serious issue, because the people have a problem which they don't even recognize as a problem, because that for them
It's their lived.
it's their lived experience. That's how
It's their reality.
they go about life. Now, even when somebody moves from there economically, gets an education, maybe gets a job, goes to university, gets a skill, that mind doesn't quite leave you.
Exactly.
This is part of the problem. It doesn't quite leave you.
It stays with you.
And
Yes, it does.
And
It
that is clear
Yes.
when you have the conversation.
Yes.
Now, the point I'm making is probably because you have the data, it's the interpretation of the data that maybe need that other side, the scientific side, the expert input from somebody who is an expert on matters of mental health to come and look at the data, look at the information, and connect those dots. So it comes out clearly that this is what is happening. It's because what you want to do with this information is you want it to influence policy in the future.
Exactly.
How do we connect this, what we are seeing? Because what you are seeing today has been found by other surveys that are conducted. Whenever the Infotrucks and the others are conducting a survey, they come up with the same. Are you happy with the way the government is running? Are you happy? Are you feeling satisfied? And people are, do you have hope for the future? People tell you the same things that they are saying. What's your income level? Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, and you said you also refer to that, has all this information.
Exactly.
The tie, the link between that and now directly into. You see, what we've been doing is we have failed to mainstream mental health, but this is what all this information that we have is telling us.
You know, the poverty that you speak of, we are talking about economic poverty, but the thing that concerns me is the poverty of the spirit. That's what really because if I'm physically disempowered, or my poverty has to do with financial lack, or it has to do with an economic situation, it's something that I can overcome. But if I've internalized it to the point where I am unable to break that barrier and see myself beyond a certain, I can't see myself doing certain things. In essence, I don't believe I can achieve or do certain things. That is worse, because then, even when the opportunity is presented, somebody will have imprisoned themselves in that particular mindset. Yeah. So even the opportunities will be lost. Now, that is a huge loss. As you were talking, you know where my mind went to? I thought of crowds of young people during this. Every time we have an election cycle around the corner, if you drive a big car, one of these four-wheel guzzlers, you stop, a crowd forms around you. And if you look at the monies that they're given, if they really do well, they'll split 50 bob. Or rather, they'll get 50 shillings each. Now, it points to a mental health situation, because what on earth are you going to do with 50 shillings? Even if it's the rural areas, in all honesty. What is this thing that you're going to do with 50 shillings? And yet people don't stop doing this thing over and over and over again. What has gotten into their minds where someone doesn't even pause and say, excuse me, is this really worth my while?
Can I just pick up on that? Because I like what you're saying. We've had on this program conversations about, and in the country, what's wrong with Kenyans. And I think we are now beginning to point towards some of these disconnects, the internalized poverty and all of that. I'd also want to say that the value of this research, which asks very interesting, simple questions, is this kind of conversation. So once you begin discussing the data, you then get, well facilitated, you bring out these issues. I want to just say, so I like this, and bearing the point that Eric is saying, that maybe tease out the issue, the linkage a little bit more. But my question is, I would like to go back a little bit to the religion factor. Did you find a correlation, any trends around religion and wellness? Or not?
Not really, we didn't find. But I wanted to also respond to Eric. Eric, the definition of mental health is a person's condition with regard to their psychological and emotional well-being. How do you tell a person's emotional well-being? Apart from using what we call the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is a medical tool, which is only limited to diagnosing depression, anxiety, you ask them about their view of life, how they feel about their country, how they feel about the future. Those will tell you about the emotional well-being state. So that there is the link. Because the problem we are trying to run away from, this is how we defeated HIV. We've not defeated it, but this is how we contended.
Yes.
We brought in psychologists, sociologists, we brought in economists, we brought in even local religious leaders.
We brought in everybody.
Integrated approach.
Yes, but the mental health conversation in this country is only limited to psychologists and psychiatrists. Why? We need researchers, we need people like you, we need all of us to
I completely agree.
Dennish,
I completely agree. What you're doing is good.
Yes.
Now let's bring in the entire ecosystem.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly, yeah.
So that if we have now the expert saying true from an expert point of view, there are issues. When you have people who also have studied, psychology, not just the psychiatrists, the psychologists as well, and then you bring in the political economists and all, will tie in that link very well.
Exactly.
And when you go back now to the people and tell them, look, this is what is happening, people can also start relating to my status today is impacted by what is happening.
Exactly.
And for me to start getting out of this, I've got to start addressing my current situation this way.
You know, Eric, in addition to what you're saying, the reason why I brought in the poverty of spirit and what I want to tie it in with, if you look at your findings, you are talking about the low-rent areas that we have in this. But I want you to take that argument, pause for a single second, and look at our political leaders.
Exactly.
That is where the real mental problem is. That class of people are unwell. No, I'm not saying this facetiously. I'm being sincere. Because if you look at the decision-making process, the short-sighted nature of the way they go about things, and the responsibility that they have, and the dichotomous nature where someone says this today, says this tomorrow, and doesn't seem to have a problem with it, these people are not well.
They haven't resolved their internalized poverty, perhaps.
And look at their background. If you look at the key politicians' background, it will tell you why they behave the way they do. So a mental health conversation, like you've said, is true. We need it up to the highest form of level.
Interesting. Can I just go back on the religion thing? I'm surprised that there's no correlation with religion and wellness outlook.
What were you thinking, Wanjiro? What was
That
on your
we'd see a
mind?
disparity.
Religion
because-
represents hope.
Yeah, hope,
does.
and they have different approaches. If religion is very significant in my life, it should.
But
affect
maybe that's
how
why we haven't had an explosion.
because
Of the religious factor.
it.
It tapers.
No, but you see, in
it
the
provides,
study,
yes.
there is no
Did
correlation.
they consider? No.
Did they consider?
Did you consider? Because that's where you need to start from.
We actually did consider, and I'm looking at because what I sent is the abridged version, but we actually did consider the correlation between the Catholics, Protestants, Muslims, and their
Evangelicals and
this
what
thing
have
is
you. And
huge.
atheists.
And yeah, exactly. This thing was huge. It was almost like 100 pages. So let me look for that, then I'll
Yeah,
let me-
because you'd expect to see some variation in terms of the type of dogma and approach being
Exactly.
adopted, or none, because maybe religion is what we do on Sunday.
You
and
know,
then
not
move to daily life.
not to pour
Maybe.
water on someone's faith or lack of it thereof, but the group of atheists that we have, one may say it's a budding group, but well, yeah, I mean statistically they
Budding, it's interesting.
yeah, statistically they're irrelevant. I mean, if you ask someone in this country whether
Not
they
irrelevant.
have
We're not
Well, they've
voting
come
here,
across.
but point made. They're a small group.
not small, insignificant. That's the point I'm trying to make. Even statistically speaking, they would not feature in influencing anything that we could consider significant. That's what I'm saying. I'm not downplaying it. I'm simply stating it as a fact.
But we may see some trend in terms of outlook,
but
comparative trend.
But let me say this also.
Yeah.
The title of the survey is to reimagine the fight against corruption. Number one, we have over 14 statutes that have been enacted by this country to deal with corruption. Majority of them have been enacted from 2013, when the dynamic duo have been in power. But we are seeing the correlation between amounts of money carted away increasing considerably with more establishment of bodies, empowering of these bodies, and giving more money. You know very well that the ODPP was just, their budgets were increased for this financial year, I think about 36 billion shillings. Then the question is, if we have all the laws and we have all the bodies, but we are seeing a lot of money increasing, perhaps is it time for us to consider other ways of fighting with graft? Because there is a huge disconnect. Young people, when you ask them here, how do you think you should be dealing with corruption? They're saying pass stiffer laws, jail the corrupt, repossess all this, and we have all those bodies. And that's why we are proposing that on the 24th and on the 25th of August, we want to convene a multi-sectoral forum that brings together all these bodies, and we want to ask them these questions. Do we then say that the amount of money we are giving you to fight graft is not effective? We're not getting any return on investment. Or do we say that the political class is just so wise that every time you come up with a law, they find a way to beat it? Or is that we don't have a political?
Or is it that's who we are? Because if you look in the last 30 years, our push has been, let's change the law.
Exactly.
Let's
Change
change
it.
the constitution.
Yeah.
Let's bring in more laws. Maybe we have wired ourselves as a society to legislate. Every new thing, the
Exactly.
solution is legislation,
Exactly.
regulation,
Exactly.
legislation, regulation. Maybe as a community, as a society, we need to step back and ask ourselves: is the problem being addressed by law? Is law the solution, or are there other solutions?
Or
And I-
where's the problem?
Or where is the problem?
Oh, by the way, we have over 31 active cases in court. Only 4 have been successfully prosecuted in terms of jail terms. The rest are not.
But if you consider that possibly the values and the software
Exactly.
is the problem, the law's not going to sort the
Exactly.
software.
We come up with law.
No,
Like-
these laws, in my opinion, are important. They are fundamental because in the absence of these laws, we really have no leg to stand on.
But we've also
the
learned
problem
that
is
the
we
laws
only
are not
rely
enough.
on the law.
Yeah, we don't need to rely on the law only.
We
Yes,
need the integrated
yes.
360
Yes.
approach.
Yes,
Exactly.
we need to have them. However, when I say that if you look at the ruling class and you really have to confess that they are unwell, it is because of the way they go about, should you say carrying out their mandate? How do you take an oath of office in public? How do you say the things you say and then you proceed to do the complete opposite? And it seems to be okay with you. Are you okay really?
Impunity is a big thing. Dannish, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank
Again,
you.
you're saying you'll have this meeting on the 24th, 25th of August?
Yes, that's the proposed date.
It'll be interesting to actually get to hear what they say.
Okay.
We can invite you soon after.
Okay.
Come with the summary of what they told you and what you told them,
Okay.
and the conversation on how it happens going forward.
All right.
Asante sana. Dannish Odongo is the founder of the Wellness Tribe. They have just conducted that survey that he's been telling us about. It's called the Macho what?
Baseline survey.
Macho Baseline Survey.
Yeah.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.